Hi, I'm Roy Burley.
And I'm Esther Branco Diaz, and welcome to part 3 of How to Turn a Toxic Past into a Purposeful Now.
And tonight we're going to be talking about addiction.
Good evening. Welcome to Trust Talks. It's good to have you with us if you're joining us. Good to see you, Roy. Are you okay?
You too? Yeah, all is well.
Welcome. Good. Good to hear. As we said just now, this is part 3 in our series of How to Turn a Toxic Past into a Purposeful Now. We've been covering lots of things, but tonight we're going to be talking about addictions. Again, it's another big subject. We're going to be sharing some of our stories again, some experiences, and we hope that you'll come on this journey with us. It's not always easy sharing some of these things, so we appreciate your compassion as we go down these roads. And the purpose really of Trust Talks is not to teach necessarily about these subjects. We're sharing from experiences in our life, struggles, difficulties, conversations that we've had over the years. We've been doing experiential learning in our life, and we're sharing some of that with you, but with the purpose of building hope, that there is a way forward from these things. There is hope. There is light at the end of the tunnel, and it might not be for everyone. Not everyone might relate to these things. They're not lessons, but hopefully pointers towards hope, that your life can be freer and can be a life of purpose. So that's what we're doing with Trust Talks. And thank you for joining with us. Thanks for those of you who are watching this later on. The subject tonight, as I mentioned, is addictions. And I always do like a little definition bit at the beginning. But really, you probably know a lot about this, people watching. You might be even more clued up about it than we are. But as you know, an addiction can be not only to a substance, but to an activity. Medical dictionaries explain it as a compulsive psychological need for something. So an addiction is an urge to do something that it's hard to control or to stop. So that thing controls you, and you can struggle to control it. Isn't that right, Roy?
Yeah.
And it was interesting because I was looking at some of this stuff online and the way different people define it or explain it, that the NHS explain it as addictions is defined as not having control over doing, taking, or using something to the point where it can be harmful to you. And I was also looking at another centre for addictions. They explain that the brain craves the reward of the substance or the activity. The brain craves the reward of the substance or the activity because they say that the brain has an intense reward system. And I thought that was a really interesting way of defining it, that our brain intensely craves rewards. And that was from theaddictioncenter.com. And I thought, actually, I was thinking about that in my life, that's an interesting way of defining this need for reward. But really, what we're talking about tonight is that addictions are an escape from pain. But let's just recap a little bit though, Roy. What is it we've been talking about for the last couple of weeks for anyone who's not seen the previous videos?
Okay, so we've been telling our stories of trauma and how trauma has affected our lives creating shame in our lives and guilt, and how often the shame causes us to hide. And so that's what we've done so far.
Yeah, we've already been on a bit of a journey. So if anyone watching, if you've been with us for those last couple of episodes or you've seen them, let us know. We'd love to know who's been following along, if it's been helpful to you, if it's been uncomfortable. Give us a wave, let us know that you're there. And also we'd love to hear your comments or feedback at the end. So if you're thinking of some stuff as we're going, please let us know. We'd love to hear your comments and to hear your feedback, really, or your experiences of the stuff that we're talking about. So let's go for it. So Roy, can you tell us what experience you've had of struggling with any addiction in your life?
Yeah, so I would say very early on in my life, there was a need to escape because of trauma. Now, none of this was conscious, but subconsciously, I had a need to escape, and it was the pain that I constantly felt emotionally. It was escaping from my house because it was always traumatic, so I never wanted to be there. It was escaping from school because, because of the traumatic experiences, I couldn't really learn, Esther. Can you imagine, like, you've had your house raided by police 6 o'clock that morning, and then as a little kid, 8, 9, 10, you got to go to school and sit down and learn something. Or your dad came home that night and your mum was beaten up and you had to call police and different things. And then you have to go and sit and learn. I don't think kids can learn who have traumatic lives very well. I think it's a bit of a struggle, and I'm not sure the teachers are always aware of that. So we would truant from school. We call it bunking off school. And then people would take us, older kids, including my brother and stuff like that, would take us to go and commit crimes. So we would go and steal, and normally the older kids would take the younger kids because they'd been in trouble with police, and if they got in any more trouble, they would land up go into, like, in those days, detention centers and Borstal and stuff like that. So they'd normally take the younger ones, and we would go and we would learn how to steal, and then we'd have to sell the stuff. So there was always this kind of escape from school, escape from the house. And then I think what happened also is I began to learn to escape in my imagination. And I think it was often, with a sexual content. So there was this, like I mentioned before, there was this desire to be loved by a woman, and so it's almost like a fantasy world. And so I think that's where lust really started in my life from a very young age. And so, and as I was saying in my story, that church became a bit of a rescue place, on one hand, but it was also a bit of a trauma. So it was a rescue place because we was able to go to church, and I went to church regular. Like, I think it was about 9 times a week at times, but I was there constantly, and I'd blocked out. In a way, it caused me to try and prevent all of the other addictions that were coming in. It gave me something to fight against. Like, by the age of 9, I was addicted to cigarettes, for example. So it wasn't going to be long, And also, actually, shoplifting for me was an addiction, because you get this real, like, sense of, adrenaline rush. You know what I mean? And that reward thing, although it's really bad, but as a kid, it's a great reward, to feel like you've done this and you've conned everyone and you've got this thing out of the shop and you haven't been caught, you know. And I remember actually when I got baptized, I was 10, trying to stop it, and I couldn't. And that's when I
Wow.
realized actually it's not so easy. Like it became such an addiction, even stealing.
Wow.
So all of these things I wasn't aware fully they were addictions. I just knew that I couldn't stop certain things. And
Mm.
and the last one was one of those that I fought against and have fought against my whole life, really. But it's a very difficult one to fight against because, you know, part of your physical makeup is to, you know, to want to make love to someone, to have sex kind of thing. So it's quite a tough one. Um, and in my context, it was very sinful. Like I thought I was told from a young age like that sex and things like that is only for procreation. It wasn't something that something that you enjoyed for the sake of it. It was to have children, you know. So I
Mm.
came from like really strict religious beliefs on that. So it's never been a comfortable thing. It's always been a sin to me, even after I got married. It's not, it's I've not been able to look at it in a healthy way yet. It's very, you know, because these things and then, you know, and when you go down these roads of lust and looking at things you shouldn't and fantasizing and all that, it's very hard to then see it in a pure way and undefiled, as the Bible says. So it started early, I would say, and then church kind of and religion and our strong religious disciplines suppressed it. So you know, we didn't go off the rails like many of us. Like if you look in my family, there's 7 of us. I've got a brother that spent most of his life in prison. I've got brothers who have been on heroin, crack, um, people that struggle with alcohol. Nearly all my family struggle with alcohol. Um, so you can see in a way, although my church background was a bit unhealthy with its extremism, but at the same time, it was also another sort of addiction, if you like, that I used to combat the negative, the toxic stuff. So but it's always been quite horrible for me, this whole church experience, because I was always rubbish at being a Christian. I was always failing and trying my best, but getting it wrong. So as time went on, I'd got baptized, but I'd always kind of backslide and get pulled back into the wrong things again. And I mentioned that when I went off to aerospace, I think I was about 17. I'd left London and I'd left my home church, and that's when I started smoking drugs. And eventually, I was so hooked. Like I would wake up, I would smoke drugs from morning to night. That with alcohol, and then often with any other amphetamines like speed. I don't know if you know these drugs, but you know, um, but but I needed to escape. That was my thing, and they were like ideal, like. But the problem with any addiction, with all of these addictions, it gives you a moment of pleasure and a moment of relief from your pain, but then now you've got 2 pains because you've got the addiction is another problem that gets worse and you have to feed. So that becomes a greater pain than a pain relief, plus the trauma that you carry in your body. So, you know, things is just horrible for me. And eventually after my apprenticeship, they didn't take me on because I was just dysfunctional. And I landed back up in London. I was selling drugs and I was on the streets there. And it was my wife, who wasn't my wife then, who said, "Why don't you come and stay with me in Portsmouth?" And I was so lost, Esther. I was so lost. Um, I had no control. I I wouldn't dare go to church, um, because if I went to church, I really felt as though if I went in there, that God would kill me. Now, to you, that might just sound crazy, but I really believed it, because we really feared God. And I remember the one time I did make it to church, and my prayer all through the service was, please God, don't kill me. Please God, don't kill me. So I wouldn't go near a church really, and I couldn't bear to listen to anything like gospel music or talk about God. It tormented me, literally. So I just sat every day with my friends. We played computers, we smoked drugs, and every now and then I felt like a little call from God. And I remember this one night I was in this, I call it a drug den, because you're just in a cloud of smoke with all your friends getting wasted. And I had this compulsion to go home. Now, remember, I said I never went near my mum because I felt so ashamed to go near any Christian, especially my mum. And I snuck in the back door. I climbed over the fence and I snuck in. And as I was sneaking in, I remember my mum was there praying. And I don't even think she turned round. And she said to me, "Come in, Roy." She says, "I've been praying for you, and I asked the Lord to send you home. I want to talk to you." So every now and then there was this little knock on the door to say, "I'm still with you." And it was very hard. It was very hard because I couldn't get back to God, even if I wanted to. And there was people that told me after, like one of my friends, he was an atheist, and there was Muslims and different, we were all kind of lost. And I remember my atheist friend talking to someone else and say, "Listen to Roy. He will convince you God is real." He was an atheist, and I was in my backslidden state. Like, how did that happen? How did I convince him? Like, I was lost. And even my Muslim friends, he would come to me to talk about God often, and I was like lost. But on these estates and stuff, often you've got no one. Christians don't go near you, so
Yeah.
you don't go near them either because you feel so defiled, so disgusting, so lost. So, but anyway, my wife now, she said to me, "Why don't you come and chill out with me in Portsmouth?" Which was a big no-no, like it church-wise. She's always been a great Christian. My dad had just died, and I had made a decision that day, like, I will never believe in God again. That's it. I cannot believe. I was just so mad, and I wasn't able to process all these different griefs that I was now experiencing. And I really tried hard not to believe in God anymore. And I went to Portsmouth, and in a way, that was the beginning of my journey back to God. And she took me to a little house group meeting, and she persuaded me to come, and I went there. And when I went there, by then I was angry, I was skinny, I was totally lost, totally drugged up. I just so dysfunctional. I don't know why she took me. It was unbelievable that she did. I was lost. And she took me into this house group meeting. And to me, they weren't Christians because they weren't from my denomination. So we thought anyone who's not from our denomination is lost. That was what I thought. I thought that. And then when I went in there, I could feel the presence of God in there, like when I was young. And tears. I hadn't cried for a long time. A long time. I stopped crying. And tears started to come down my cheek. And I felt as though a voice said to me, not audibly, but in my heart, "I still love you." And it was a similar voice that I knew from when I was a kid in church, when my Mum used to give us a hiding and make us to go Sunday school and church, and I hated being there. I wanted to be a gangster. And I remember being on the bench, just mad, face like thunder. And then they would start worshiping, and it's like all the anger would leave me, and a voice would seem to always speak to my heart to say, "I want you. I love you." You know, it was that kind of voice. And I could not believe it. Like God was in this place amongst these people that I didn't even think were Christians. And I was sick as well, you know, Esther, then. By then I was sick and they prayed for me and I got healed. And I thought,
Mm.
wow, I don't think I knew anyone who had been healed up until then. And this pastor, he said, listen, I can help you. I've been where you were. You listen to me. And he was the one who began to discipline me. He was ex-military. And so he helped me get off drugs, and he made me read books, and he developed the hunger in me for learning and reading and reading the Bible and everything like that, like never before. So that, and then eventually I was able to get back into aircraft work, and I started working on helicopters and everything. But by then, Esther, my memory was damaged, short-term memory, and the doctors didn't know whether it would come back. But after a year, it came back. Well, my wife says she's not so sure if it has,
I was
but I
just
couldn't
thinking
hold a
that.
conversation. Yeah, I couldn't hold a conversation. I would forget what I was talking. I was gone. I was gone. So then I started on this journey to go after God, but still, you know, and I was in my 20s then, but still I got married and everything. But I would still have these struggles. I still always struggled with lust, and I still would have times when I was overwhelmed with this feeling of trauma. Now on reflection, it wasn't conscious. It was almost like I'd get taken over by these feelings, and I just did what I knew to numb it. And although I didn't go back to drugs, I would have probably if I knew where to get them, you know, at times, because I was so desperate. But I definitely went back to alcohol. So I'd have this kind of spiral thing where I'd be okay and then not okay. But the thing was, there was a gift developing in me to speak and stuff and to understand the Bible. So people would want me to preach. And the pastor, people would want me to be like the pastor and things like that. And I never wanted to, because I always felt I'm not good enough. I'm still struggling. But anyway, they persuaded me and I become an associate pastor, but I would still struggle. I'd be leading people to Christ. I'd be laying hands on people, watching them be healed. I would so many amazing things, but I'd still be struggling. And to be honest with you, that's been the story. And then I thought, you know what I'll do? I'll go to Bible school. Well, I felt a call to go to Bible school. And we left everything. I left my job and everything and went to Bible school. And I was still struggling after being in Bible school for 3 years. And I remember, so there was this feeling like, and more, it was pushing me into the ministry. And more, I'm thinking, I am not worthy. I'm still not worthy, Esther. And I need to get out of this. I need to give up. But then I remembered before, when I gave up, when I left church and everything, I was finished. I couldn't get back to God. So I didn't know what to do. And so, and I remember one day I was drunk and I was walking down the canal and thinking about giving up. And I sat next to a guy fishing. And what do I talk about to him in my drunken state? Jesus. It doesn't matter where you put me. Like if you put me in prison, wherever you put me, there's something in me, in my worst state. Like Jeremiah says, I don't want to talk about God. I don't want to speak the word. But he said it was like fire shut up in my bones. And I thought, well, what can I do? But in a way, it felt like a little bit uh, deceptive because people didn't know my struggles. So, like, to sit and talk, Hester, and tell about all my struggles. This is what I've been hiding my whole life, trying to fix. But I realize after 48 years, I I I haven't fixed it yet, quite fixed it. And so as the journey has gone on, um, it's the I don't know, things have I've never asked to preach anywhere that I know of. I think only one church, when they didn't have a pastor, I offered my services, but I've preached all around the world, and I've never wanted to preach. I've never asked to minister, to help people, to do these things. I haven't felt worthy to, but it's what my whole life does. So I never know what to do with myself, Esther. With my struggles, because on one side it is so painful to me, it's such a thorn in my flesh, but on another side there's something in me that people say helps them. So what do I do? Do I just give up, or do I limp like Jacob and help people? Do you know what I mean? Do I go with my messed up self and let God use what's, to me, is quite rubbish? I hope this is making sense. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, that's been the struggle, but I have learned something very significant along the way. And what I'm telling you is the truth. Is true. It's true about me in my carnal self. When the Bible calls it the old Adam, or the false self, or the carnal, the fleshly self, and that is, I'm a weak, rubbish Christian in myself, Esther. That's true, no doubt about it. But in my spirit, I've been in my spirit so many times, and in my spirit I have no struggles. It's phenomenal to me. Like, I'm not lustful, I'm not addicted to, and there's no pain, there's no addictions, there's no anger, there's peace. The Bible calls it peace and joy in the Holy Spirit. I and so what I've my journey has been, and some of the things that I think we're going to share, Esther, in the coming weeks, is the techniques and the things of the disciplines of how do you walk in the Spirit? How do you get, as Jesus, all the teaching of Jesus was getting you in the kingdom which is within you. Paul called it in your spirit, or in your true self. I don't know what language you want to use, but it's a part of you that is connected to divinity, and it has all the resources. So I spent many years trying to improve myself, but you don't improve flesh. God's not trying to, my old teacher Arthur Burt used to say, God's not trying to improve you, he's trying to remove you. He's trying to that's what he did on the cross. He killed the old Adam, and that's what he's trying to do. So I don't know if that kind of helps a bit on addictions, Esther. If there's anything you wanted to ask me, or anything that I
Yeah.
haven't.
Wow, there's so much there. But I think, Roy, first of all, well done for sharing that, because it's really hard. It's not easy to do that. But I believe a lot of that is really helpful, because I think, like you're saying, you come out of trauma covered in shame, or maybe the shame comes later, and addictive behaviors can start. I think the bit that you said about it being like an ongoing cycle, because from that addiction comes more shame, and the fight, the striving, the continuing to improve, or trying to resist these things, or fight these things, or change yourself. It's exhausting, and it
Yeah.
goes round and around and around, and usually in a downward spiral. So I think you actually telling it like it is, that there's a place in us you can go to, that physical fight and struggle doesn't go on. And I'm excited for us to explain more about that in the coming coming weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, addiction can be many things, Esther, don't you think?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think there's so many that probably spring to mind when you think about addictions, and probably the ones that you're referring to a lot. And if anyone had looked at my life, probably no one would think I would struggle with any kind of addictive behavior at all, because drink and drugs and alcohol or these substances have really been my struggle. In some ways, my struggle is a lot more hidden than that. So what began for me coming out of trauma as a little girl and as a child coming out of abuse was the need to achieve and to be productive. I think really we'd probably identify it as perfectionism. So what I learned through abuse was that, like I've explained in previous weeks, you can always watch back, that I was made to believe I was to blame for being abused because I was evil and bad and I needed punishing, and I needed to do certain things in order to make myself better. And I learned that was drummed into me and set me on a path of needing to work to make myself better, as a better person. And I just drove myself as a kid, obviously completely unaware that I was doing that, but needing to be brilliant at things, needing to achieve, needing to make myself good. And all of it was to feel worthy and to feel like I could be loved. So for me as a child, that was being very academic, doing every after class, every after school activity. I threw myself into music. So I wasn't just going to the odd music lesson every day. It was I'm achieving high results in playing the piano and flute and the theory of music and different bands and orchestras. And I need to do this after school. I need to do this every weekend. I need to be better. And I got once the abuse had stopped, it wasn't many years, but I got down that path and suffered complete burnout. I got seriously ill. My teenage years were kind of wiped out due to being ill, but the struggle went on, goes on,
Yeah.
continues. And it's not so much, I don't think it's so much perfectionism now, but it's an addiction to productivity. I have to be productive. I can't. It's better now than it was, but it's always there. And the inability to rest, or the guilt or condemnation that I feel if I'm just watching a movie or TV, putting my feet up isn't something that I do. And although it's very different now, I can cover it up, or I could cover it up with just, oh, I'm just highly motivated. I make things happen. I'm a go-getter. You want something done. I'm a starter and a finisher, and highly motivated. But that drive, what's behind it, is very negative and has been very destructive in my life, and would still have the potential to be that way. Now, if you're not that way inclined, you would probably think, what is she talking about? So she's a busy person, and I have to keep an eye on it so that it's a healthy motivation. But I've gone through cycles throughout my life of can't stop, can't rest, becoming seriously ill, and it's gone on. And
Yeah.
and really it's a form of hiding, because I don't want to look at why I feel that way. Why do I feel like I'm bad if I'm resting, or I almost feel the need to apologize because I haven't done enough? What's behind it? And those are the things that we don't want to look at. We don't
Yeah.
like to look at. So my life has been addicted to
Can I
working.
ask Can I ask a bit about, the effect of that on you? Because by the time you was 15, my understanding is that you landed up blind and paralyzed. Is that
Yeah,
right?
yeah, that's right. And
Your body shut down.
Yeah, and it soon after the abuse happened, I became quite ill soon after it stopped. And people would say, oh, it's like a psychosomatic effect, but actually it's the containment of this trauma. Like I said before, you never have peace, you're agitated, you're on red alert. My I got a virus. We got the flu as a family one Christmas, and I just never got well. So the
Wow.
the effects that trauma can have on your immune system, stress, we know has major effects on the body. I got a bit better eventually. I missed a year of school, got better. I was diagnosed with ME, and a few years later, when I was 15, I got another virus, and this time it attacked my central nervous system, and everything shut down. There was a lack of blood flow to parts of my brain. I was under a neurologist in London. I lost all movement in my body. I could just move my face and my right hand. So what I was experiencing was completely physical, because I would have brain scans that showed physically there was something very wrong with my brain, and things I wasn't responding to. The central nervous system wasn't responding to things, and I couldn't see. I had to have a tube up my nose. At one point I couldn't swallow, so I had to have everything done for me. I couldn't sit up in a chair. You know, people would literally have to lift me out. I had to have a bed bath in hospital, and I was like that for a year and a half. And then it was a very long. I learned to walk again in my life. I relearn every movement in my body. So it was another year and a half that I was in a wheelchair after that. And so the effect that trauma had on my body, really it was through the drive, the addiction to numb the pain that made me ill, as opposed to the abuse itself. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So the trauma is almost worse than the actual abuse, if you can't say that, but do you know what I mean? It carries on long after the abuse, is what I should say. It's not worse, but you're reliving it in a way, in a subconscious way. So
Yeah.
what's that like, Esther? Can I just ask, like, you were blind, you was paralyzed. I mean, what was you feeling and thinking, and what was happening inside you emotionally?
Well, I was completely the same, mentally alert, completely the same on the inside. So it was the worst kind of agony you can imagine. I was still a very mentally quick person, and still
Yeah.
buzzing inside,
Gosh.
and unable to do everything. So I was angry, I was scared, I was far from home. I was more terrified because, you know, I'd have male nurses have to give me a bed bath, or as a 15-year-old girl who's already been through abuse. It was a very frightening time, and
Traumatic.
not being able to make your body do what you wanted it to do. So
Could you
I
speak, Esther?
and yes, I could speak, but they then put me on a trial run, if you like, of a neurological medication while I was in hospital, which I agreed to try and re-stimulate parts of the brain. And it caused me to have seizures.
Oh
I had a
no.
very bad reaction to it, and I would end up having like 15 seizures a day. And normally after a fit or a seizure, your brain automatically tells your body to start breathing again, but I wouldn't. And that wouldn't happen with me. It wasn't an automatic thing. So often they'd have to resuscitate me, and I became a bit more like a vegetable. I don't really remember much about that time. The only thing I can really remember is praying to die, just like, God, let me die. You know, if this is how my life is going to be, I cannot live my life like this. I have little bits of other memories, but that's the defining memory for me. And obviously, that didn't happen. But I was told, well, my parents were told that because I had to be resuscitated, I wouldn't properly recover. My brain would probably be damaged in some way, and or I would all of the tendons in my left hand had shrunk because it hadn't been used for so long. So they used to have to come like prise my hand open to put it on a splint, and they said she'll probably never use her left hand again, or she will be, you know, mentally affected by the lack of oxygen. And you know, none of that has come to pass. And
Wow.
I'm glad now that I survived it all. But in the day, it was the darkest times.
We were having a discussion, Esther and myself, with a Christian psychotherapist, and he was talking to us about trauma. And one of the things I remember him saying to us, Esther, is that when we don't face our trauma, he said, obviously when we're kids we can't, and that's our mechanism to protect ourselves, which is a blessing really, because it's just too much. But as we become adults, we can't just block it all the time, because what it happens is it manifests in our body in sickness. And so it's really important that we get help in some way, and we start to learn to face our traumas. Did you catch when he said that, Esther? Did you have any thoughts?
Yeah, definitely. And I think also I used to be a sports massage therapist, and you look at the effects of stress on the body, which trauma is obviously a major form of stress, and an ongoing. The effects on the body are just ginormous. And what he was saying about the effects on the brain and your way of thinking, and you know, to be, I think you described it in the first week, just to live your life without peace, like you're constantly in a fight or flight
Yeah.
state. And that can be the bit I think that's hard to, in my life, I found that's hard to get rid of, that agitation in a way. But yes, it was interesting how addictions take on very different forms in different people's lives. And this is what we were saying the other day, like you said before, that the trauma that occurs in your life, it happens and it's over. But the effects of shame, guilt, which really for me, this addictive behavior is an effect of the shame that goes on, like we said before. And you know, I'm going to mention some other addictions as well, because some of them are obvious, and some of them, when I was looking at it, I just thought, oh yeah, these are tender points really in my life. So obviously we've mentioned the drinking and the drugs, alcohol, nicotine, solvents, but also there are these more subtle ones that are easier to hide, like the one I was talking about, which is this drive for productivity, which can be work as well, shopping, eating or not eating, having that, oh, I need the odd glass of wine each night to help me with the kids at dinner time, or, you know, that odd glass of wine can be an addiction to hygiene, sex, gambling, internet, and phone. And I thought, phone addiction, that's I think that's one I have as well, because it's a difficult thing to put down. I don't know if anyone else is
Yeah.
thinking of those things. We've got some comments coming in which we can tackle in a little while as well. But do you feel like, Roy, you're free of addictions?
So I would say no, on one hand, and yes on another. I think it depends on your location. So I think if I'm in the flesh, if I'm in the carnate mind, I've got a natural default which will put me in trouble that I have to be aware of. I think a lot has been taken when God was bringing the children of Israel into the promised land. He said, I've taken a lot of your enemies out, but I've left some giants and you need to slay them yourself, you know. So I feel like loads has been taken out. Thank God. Thank God. Otherwise I wouldn't be here. But there's still a few giants. And if I, in my natural default, they take control. You know what I mean? But if I'm in my spirit, I don't have any addictions. So it's more of a location. I don't think, I realized, like I said before, you don't improve. I don't think you improve. I think it's where you live. And so my life really is one that has to learn, how do I live not in my head? Because you know the thing, Esther, with the carnate mind, it's all in the mind. It's the mind, and the mind thinks back on these things, or the body. See, the mind and the feelings are connected, so the body starts to feel these traumas and these feelings like they're just there in my body often, Esther. There's no reason for them, but don't forget, those negative feelings will now trigger negative thoughts, and then those thoughts will feed the feelings, and before you know it, you're feeling terrible, but you're not conscious if you're not watching what you're thinking, what you're feeling, and before you know it, you're off doing something to numb the pain, whatever that is, whatever your default is. So that will happen to me if I don't watch. The Bible calls it watch and pray, so you don't enter temptation. So it's like an alertness that I have to practice of. But sometimes I get caught off guard, Esther, and something will trigger things from my, and I just can't get on top of it, and I forget everything I teach people, and I get taken out. So it, you know, and then that's where more shame comes, because it's like I need to hide because people think I'm some great man of God or something, some great speaker or helper to people, and I'm thinking I'm struggling. So then I think that doesn't help the pride side, the hiding, because in my pride there's no grace. God says he resists the proud, but he gives grace to the humble. So in my pride, I'm like Adam, and I sew fig leaves together and Eve to make clothes and cover my shame. But it's a pain. It doesn't work. It's a lot of work, but doesn't work effectively. Whereas the only person that really can cover us and protect us from shame is if God's grace covers us. And that takes humility, that takes honesty, constant honesty, to keep going back into the spirit. Does that make sense, Esther? Is that clear?
Yeah, that's good. I think that's really good. And like we said before, we're going to expand on this a bit more in a couple of weeks' time as to what that really means. What is the carnate mind? What does it mean to look at it? And it'll be good to expand on that even more. So thank you, Roy, for that.
Yes.
And like I said in the beginning, this might not be helpful to everyone, but I believe there'll be someone who's going to watch this who is in this struggle and is feeling like you did, Roy, way back when you couldn't see a way out of it or a path forward. And some people might think, oh, well, this is really not helpful to hear that the struggle goes on. But there is a light at the end of the tunnel. There is a way not to constantly be in a battle, not to be in that agitated state. And we hope that for anyone watching who's in that place, that you'll know that there is hope. I wonder if we can just share some of the comments that are coming in. Thank you, everyone, for the comments that you're sharing. If we don't mention you, please forgive us. It's only because we're seeing some of them come through. But Bev's been sharing some comments. Thank you, Beverly, for what you've been saying. So it was picking up on what you were saying, Roy, to let's really look at what we're feeling and let's get to the root of it. That is society. Oops, sorry, things are moving. That as a society, sorry, your comment's gone from my screen. In different ways, we are addicted. So yeah, as a society, in different ways, we are addicted. That's really true, Bev. We have to face our traumas and we have to sit in the pain momentarily so we can really face it and let it pass instead of collect it in our bodies. That's really the summing up that you're describing, isn't it, Roy? Thank you for that, Beverly. Paul Langford has commented, thank you, Roy, for your testimony that despite your struggles, you still had that place of freedom. That's so helpful, brother. Thank you, Paul, for getting involved. It's good to hear from you.
Bev.
And Hannah, hi Hannah. She says technology is the most subtle, and many people, myself included, would not say that they have an addiction unless they look at its definition and weigh technology and social media up in their life. Scary, eye-opening. Yes, it is, Hannah. It it takes a hold and you don't even know it. She said nothing but Christ should have a hold on us, really. And
Wow.
that's really true because often with my phone, it's like, oh, I always need to be contactable for work, but it eats into everything, and it can become like a real strong pull to be in this cyber world. Yes, so if anyone else got any other comments, we'd love hearing from you.
No. It's the
Even if you're
you see the
watching this.
carnal mind, Esther. It likes to eat. It came about right at the beginning to eat information of that which is knowledge of good and evil. It wants information of good and evil. It wants to know what is good and what is bad, and it likes to judge. And so it loves information. And so our whole world now is driven towards that tree in a way. So, and the carnal mind will eat for it for hours. Like we all, like you start looking at one thing, and the next thing you know, hours later, you're still flipping through stuff. It's crazy, and you can't stop yourself. Like, it's the same with the TV and stuff like that. So when you're in your spirit and you practice being in the spirit, you're able to keep an eye on yourself and think, look, here I go, and pull out quicker, but otherwise it would just rob you of all your time.
Yeah, it's a different awareness that you're talking about. Yeah. Awesome. And anyone else got any comments, please send them to us now. If you are watching this later on, still write your comments, and we'd love to hear what you're thinking, what you're feeling, if this is any help to anyone, or you're just enjoying the journey with us on this awkward, uncomfortable journey of some difficult, sensitive issues. But we appreciate you being here with us. Next week, we're going to be talking about grief. Another challenging one, but we would love it if you could join us, and give us your feedback, give us a wave, and for those of you watching this later on, we would really appreciate you taking your time just to listen to our stories of hope. Beverly says it's that whole concept of being conscious and mindful rather than living in default, which I know I often do.
Wow.
Yeah.
So good, Bev.
Yeah.
Really good comments. Spot on, really, to what we're saying and the direction we're going to be heading in.
Yeah, definitely. And Lindsay sent a message. Hi, Lindsay. Good to have you with us. She says, naming and talking about our individual struggles with addiction is really, really important. We have an enemy that wants to isolate us and tell us we're on our own. For me, hearing other people's experiences is helpful. There are commonalities that we share, whilst each journey into and out of addiction is unique. I identify with what Roy is saying about the battle being ongoing. By God's grace, I'm not where I was. Woohoo! Yes, Liz. Yes.
Yeah. But Esther, if I could say this, that very rarely, you see, in our Christian world, we all got to be perfect. So we all wear a mask. So we're not allowed to talk like this, because if we do, we're scared to be judged. And then one of the reasons that's caused me to hide more is because often I've gone to Christian leaders. I've only ever heard one Christian leader talk about his struggles. That was my old teacher, Arthur Burt. But previous to that, I've never heard a Christian leader talk to me about their struggles. And then, so maybe they didn't have any. So I just thought, well, leaders must be perfect. So I'm definitely not going to be a leader. Do you see what I mean? And when I would go to them, they did more damage to me, Esther, because they put more of a burden on me, that they didn't help me. There was no compassion. They didn't understand what they weren't. I suppose they weren't struggling what I was. I don't know. But when I heard Arthur Burr talk about his struggles, it did something to my heart. It gave me hope. I thought, because I knew this man knew God. And I thought, if that man has struggles like he says, there's hope for me. And, and I remember you said something similar, Esther, didn't you? Like, because I was like, it's so hard for me to do this because, I want people to think I'm a nice guy, and you said something like, do you think people will feel bad about you? You were saying that.
Yeah. And I think when you're going through a struggle, you can look at people like you've described and think, well, I can't relate to them in any way because they're perfect and I'm in the gutter. But when you've shared with me your difficulties and your struggles, once you said to me, how does it make you feel me sharing this? Does it make you feel worried about me, or is this the right person to be helping me, or does it make you think less of me? And it was the total opposite. That actually it was in your struggle that I could relate to you and think, here's someone who knows the journey, who knows that it's hard and yet has still found some peace, some purpose in life. And that thing isn't controlling them anymore. So it makes you relatable. And when you're in struggle, you're in the darkness, you're in the hopelessness, you want to look at someone who's walked the journey and is coming out the other side, or has come out the other side, or at least is having a victory in some capacity. And I think that's the purpose or the heart behind what I hope to do with Trust Talks, is that you can hear from someone like you, Roy, who's walked the walk. You've been in the arena with the blood and the sweat and the tears that we talked about last week. But there is peace and purpose. So thank you for sharing, Roy, in all honesty and not holding back. It's I think it's really encouraging. And I thank you to all of you who've joined us and to those who'll be watching later. We really appreciate you. And we will head off now. Just one last comment. Beverly says, we really need each other and we really need each other's authenticity. Our community needs to be real. And love that you are all sharing this. Thank you, Beverly, for your encouragement. We're really grateful.
Thank you.
And, we're going to head off now because it's time. Thanks so much to all of you. And we will be back talking about grief next week on Thursday at 7:30.
Thank you for watching Trust Talks by the Purim Trust. To find out more about the work that we do supporting vulnerable women and children, you can go to thepurimtrust.org and get involved with building hope in the lives of those who need it.